Hello, you are watching Chapter 9 of my TearRing Saga Champions of Utena low turn count playthrough. Before we go getting into the map though, we have an extended preparation segment. This is the first of the reunions in the game, which occur when Runen and Holmes end up in the same place. When these occur, we're able to shift units and items and gold between the two armies as we see fit. It's very important to get these distributions right in a playthrough like this, so I'm going to go over all of the choices I make here. Firstly, Mel and Marouge both need to be shifted into Holmes' army, because they have some very important items that they need to pick up early on in his part of the map. Roger also has to go with Holmes because he and Mel need to be put in the same army. If you try and put them in different armies, they both default to Runen's route. So we have to actively put them both in Holmes' army here. The next few choices are all based on features of each route. Runen's route is generally the more challenging one, with some very difficult maps. These maps are also all outdoor maps, which means that the powerful cavalry units that we have are much more useful there. Holmes, on the other hand, has a few indoor maps where having a mount is a disadvantage, and so we're going to send Vega with Holmes as our powerful combat unit for those maps. We also send Martel along with Holmes. She is capable of recruiting a unit in Holmes' route, although it's not strictly necessary. So the main reason we send her this way is that Runen's maps are very hostile to flyers, with a lot of powerful enemy bow users to deal with. On Holmes' route, she can fly free and wide on the outdoor maps without too much difficulty. The rest of the units I send with Holmes are more or less there for minor utilities. Lee is a very powerful magical combat unit, and he's going to see some use in the indoor maps, while Christ went along with Holmes just in case I needed a high movement combat unit at any point. Bart and Plum get split up due to the upcoming event that will make Plum extremely powerful, and Bart needs to go with Holmes in order to re-recruit her later on. As far as items go, our Nightcrest and Pilum go with Holmes for Naron to use later on. I also put the Goddess Potion in Holmes' inventory because he's going to need it soon enough. This is one of the very rare occasions where a luck stat booster is of any importance. I dropped Plum's in-armor staff in Holmes' convoy as well, and actually if I did this again I would probably do it the other way around, with Plum taking the in-armor staff and Holmes taking Lan's mirror instead. Either of these items stays in Plum's inventory through the events that she goes through. And I think in-armor would have been more useful on Runen's route, while Lan's mirror has a place in its strategy on one of Holmes' first maps. The really key decision at this point is which army to send the save staff with. There is a very difficult map in Runen's route that I would really have liked to have the save staff for, since in the last run I did, I relied pretty heavily on flyers to take it on, and there are lots of bows on that map. However, in this run, because there are actually two maps on Holmes' route that are extremely unreliable, I elected to send the save staff with him instead, and that turned out a lot better than my last run. The last thing I did was to send all of Runen's gold with Holmes instead, and that's because of an event that's going to happen at the end of this map. Now, on our way to the map, we picked up a new unit, Marielle, but I'm going to talk about her later on because we've got a lot to get through in the early parts of this strategy. Firstly, we are once again dealing with the split deployment groups. We have one group north of the desert, and the other group is stuck south of the desert. Obviously, we need to make sure that our strongest units, which would be Raffin, Zieg, and also Raquel, are with Runen north of the desert to make sure that he can survive and get through all of these scary enemies. Meanwhile, we just leave a bunch of scrubs down below the desert because there are no enemies down there and they're perfectly safe. We're also deploying Tom for this map, and he has an important role, which is not something that only he could do, but he's going to do it for me because I need him to get experience points if possible. The objective of this map is for Runen to seize, but this is where this starts to get really challenging, because on this map there are a really large number of enemies, and they're starting to have some pretty terrifying equipment loadouts, such as a Killing Edge unit who is attacking Raffin this turn. Among the other enemies there are also a Halberd enemy, who deals effective damage to both Raffin and Zieg, so we have to be really careful of him, and a Hammer enemy, just in case we had decided to bring any armored units to this. And there are also several enemies using brave weapons, not to mention the Chukonu artilleryman who is waiting for us to get close. All in all, our strong cavalry units are going to be stretched to the very limits of their durability and strength to get through this map with Runen safely in tow. Speaking of Runen, he is not going to go directly towards the seize point on this map. Instead, he has to take a little detour down into the desert in order to talk to a green unit and recruit them. This is a pretty important recruitment because, once again, this is required in order to get some more recruitments later on down the line. I've already pointed out the Halberd enemy, and on this turn we do our best to get rid of him as efficiently as possible. It's extremely risky to have the Halberd guy attack Raffin or Zieg. In fact, this is one of the only places on the run where I actually had Zieg die on me, so we want to make sure he's eliminated as quickly and safely as possible. At this point we have Runen finish off the Hammer enemy, using the steel sword that we gave him specifically so he'd have the power to do so. If you're astute, you'll notice that this actually cost Runen a point of movement here. Ordinarily, we would want to avoid that at all possible on a map with a route as tight as this one, but thankfully, because Runen has to cross the desert, this point of movement is okay to lose. When Runen does cross the desert, if you go full movement every single turn up to then, you end up crossing 2 desert tiles and then only needing to cross 1 more desert tile to reach the talk conversation with the green unit. So losing this 1 point just means that we end up crossing 2 tiles of desert terrain on 2 consecutive turns, and thus reach the green unit in exactly the same number of turns either way. Now, on this enemy phase, Raffin and Zieg are going to be taking on the brunt of the enemy group. But unfortunately I was a little too cautious in placing them during the player phase, and it's not going to go quite as I had planned. Raffin is going to end up taking most of the combat here, which is unfortunate because he didn't equip a pylon, although he still ends up killing a decent amount of what attacks him. The real problem here is Zieg. I should have pushed him a bit further in order to bait the artilleryman with the Chukonu on this turn, and then kill him next turn, because that's by far the biggest threat. Overall, this blunder didn't cost me much, because Raffin is also a really good use for all of the experience points, but it is going to cost me something in a minute because of the Chukonu blunder. On this turn, Raffin is going to kill off the brave crossbow enemy who attacked him last turn, and that deals with most of the threatening enemies around here, and opens Runen's way. Unfortunately, another consequence of Zieg not getting combat in the last enemy phase is that he does not have any Wrath critical built up, and that makes him unable to finish off the Chukonu enemy reliably. And that means that Runen is going to have to walk into range of that thing, and we're going to have to rely on its fairly low might and accuracy in order for Runen to survive. In the meantime, Raquel is doing her best to bait some armors back, so that we can try and feed them to Mariel, who is just about made it across the desert at this point. Raquel's durability isn't the greatest though, and so I have her hide in a forest, which means that most of the armors actually end up going in the other direction. At the same time, Tom manages to reach the choke point that he needs to hold for this map. Later on, there are going to be quite a few reinforcements in the lower part of this map, and we need to make sure that none of our scrubs are in range of them. Fortunately, all of these enemy reinforcements are unpromoted cavaliers, and unpromoted cavalry cannot walk on desert terrain at all. So with Tom blocking the only path across the desert that they can possibly take, and the rest of our weak units having started to cross the desert back to the left of the map, we're going to be completely safe, and Tom is going to have a good time there getting a large amount of experience points. We now see Runan getting attacked by the Chukonu, and unfortunately this cost me a miracle charm. But this is okay because we do have quite a few of them, and we'll be able to buy them later on. Raffin now makes use of the Armor Slayer in order to cleave through the artilleryman's armor and finish him off. We picked up this first Armor Slayer back in Chapter 7, but I didn't comment on it at that point. It's quite a bit stronger than the air stock, making it extremely useful for dealing with all of the armored enemies that we're going to have to face in this route. Now that the hardest part of the map is done, and we're starting to feed experience into Mariel, let's talk about her a bit. Mariel is the second mage in the game, and she actually has a slightly different mage class to Marouge. While Marouge is proficient in wind and thunder tomes, Mariel is proficient in fire and light tomes at base. They both promote into sages, who are proficient in all four of those. Mariel's personal tome is called Starlight, and it has the highest might of any tome in the whole game, with 20, as well as being quite accurate at 97 hit. In addition, it grants a plus 30 avoid bonus, which goes some way towards making up for the fact that it is quite heavy and weighs Mariel down. Mariel unfortunately isn't very useful, especially because her low base level of 1 makes it difficult for her to reach promotion and thus get some decent stats. However, I am going to try my best to get her as high level as possible, because she does have a very important role later on in the game with her second personal tome. One final interesting thing about Mariel is that she is the only unit in the whole game to have truly mutually exclusive skills that she learns from leveling up. If she reaches level 15 as a mage, she learns the Wrath skill, whereas if she gets to that level already promoted as a sage, she instead learns Luna. Luna is a skill that we haven't come across yet. It is a proc skill that negates the enemy's defensive stats when it activates, and no unit in this entire run is going to learn it, hence why I'm mentioning it here. Anyway, there are other units who learn skills based on whether they're promoted or not, but for every other unit in the game, it is possible to chart a path so that you can learn all of those skills by promoting at specific levels. Okay, let's move on. Something that just now happened was that there was a little cutscene, and then the boss changed. There are two possible triggers for this change occurring. Either you engage the original boss in combat, or you defeat most of the enemy units around him. Either of these occurrences will cause him to attempt to call a retreat, which the true boss is having none of. This boss is Dagon, who we last saw running away scared after we beat him down in Chapter 5. This time, he doesn't have any tricks to survive, so we are going to get to kill him properly this time. In fact, I've already sent Zeeg up to get the job done on this enemy phase. This leaves just a couple of units over in the right-hand area, which cannot possibly combine to kill Runan, so he's safe despite the fact that he looks in a bit of a fragile state. The enemy Armored Knight is in fact in heal AI at this point, because we weakened him a little bit. And that means that he is going to run back to the left-hand side of the map, where he thinks he can heal up on the house in the upper left corner. That of course means that he is going to run headfirst in a trap, and Mariel is going to end up killing him for experience points. On this enemy phase, we can see that the reinforcements I mentioned earlier have arrived, and are now moving in on Tom's position. But before I get too in-depth on that, we're going to have to talk about fighting Dagon. Thankfully on this run, Zeeg managed to hit the speed benchmarks to double him, and ends up casually one-round KOing him. Unlike the last time we fought him, Dagon has brought a tome that allows him to counter-attack at one range, and on every turn. He does still have his black hole tome on him, but thankfully that can't attack at one range, so I don't have to consider what turn I'm trying to enemy phase kill him on. This boss actually gave me a huge amount of trouble on a previous attempt of this map, because neither Raffin nor Zeeg had enough speed to double him on that run, and Dagon decided to just toy with me by repeatedly dodging 70+% hits and avoiding crits from a wrath boosted Zeeg constantly. It was a real pain. With the boss and most of the enemies dead, our only remaining concerns on this map are the reinforcements. The southern reinforcements are, as mentioned, unable to cross the desert terrain, so they are going to pile up around Tom, and he is able to one-round KO them with an iron bow. Unfortunately, their AI is set in such a way that because Tom has such high defense, they quite often refuse to attack him, which limits him a bit, and means that we're mostly going to be seeing him just get one kill each phase. And you can see here that they're piling up but not attacking him, even though the first one could have attacked him with no fear of a counter-attack. Meanwhile, starting from this turn, we're going to be seeing some more reinforcements up near the fortress where our cavalry units are. These two enemies are shadow mages, and they come with Nosferatu equipped, so it's quite risky to fight them because they can just heal up damage that you do. Luckily, in this case, we managed to kill them both in one hit without having to worry about them, thanks to a timely critical hit from Raffin's killer lance. Raffin and Zeeg now need to carefully consider where they stand. There are further reinforcements coming next turn, and in this game, you can completely block reinforcements by standing where they're going to spawn, even if they don't spawn from a house or a fort. This is quite useful, and in this map we're able to use it to block one of the two dangerous reinforcements that's going to be coming next turn from ever appearing. Raffin has been fighting an awful lot, and after this combat he reaches level 17 and picks up the Vantage skill. This is going to come in fairly useful in some circumstances further down the line, because being able to counterattack before the enemy gets their hit is, as mentioned with Martel, quite handy, although it's not as useful for Raffin because he's bulkier in the first place. Runen is finally reaching the green unit on this turn. His name is Narcus, and he is a thief, and he is also the character who we talked to in the house back in Chapter 3. Narcus has some extremely interesting properties as a unit, but we're not going to have him for most of the game as he leaves after this map, so I'll discuss him more when we get him permanently. I trade Narcus's inventory off him here, which isn't strictly necessary, because Narcus dumps his inventory in our convoy before he leaves. Doing it here gets the money bag onto Runen so he can use it next chapter though, so that's a plus. When Narcus leaves at the end of this chapter, he takes half of our money with us, which is why I gave all of our gold to Holmes so that we wouldn't lose any. We do get the opportunity to get some of it back when we recruit him again later on, but I have gotten into the habit of just not letting him take any in the first place. This is also why Runen got to keep all of the money bags when we went through the reunion, because those can be used in order to fill up his money coffers a little bit. On this turn, the reinforcements included a new type of enemy. This is a witch. Witches in this game are quite similar to their appearance in Fire Emblem Gaiden. They have the warp skill, which allows them to teleport anywhere on the map. Their AI is still not very smart though, and I'll go over that later on once we see more witches in action. Now, on this turn, Narcus moved 2 tiles right and picked up a special item called a member key. There are hidden items in the 2 desert maps in this game, but this is the only hidden item on this particular map, and only thieves can pick them up, which is one more point in their favor as a utility unit. The member key is an item that allows you to enter the secret shops in this game. Secret shops are a well-established staple in Fire Emblem, but they're quite different in this appearance. The house in the upper left that I mentioned earlier is in fact a secret shop. If you visit it without the member key, you'll just get a generic little event, but visit it with the member key and you'll be able to buy some pretty impressive items, including physics staves and Levin swords. Unlike the member card from Fire Emblem, the member key has durability. Each time you visit a secret shop and buy at least one thing, its durability will be reduced by 1. And there are more than 5 secret shops in the game, so you do want to watch that sometimes. However, I don't visit this secret shop, and unfortunately I don't end up visiting a single secret shop in this game. There is one secret shop much later on that sells some decent items that I might have wanted to visit, but I didn't manage to get there, and so the member key went unused. As we come to the end of this enemy phase, we'll see that the lower reinforcements have finally stopped coming. And I want to talk about them just for a moment, because I actually had some really good luck with the enemies choosing to attack Tom when they had the chance, including several 2-range enemies. And that meant that Tom actually got a whole lot more experience in this particular run than on my average test run, which I'm quite happy about. Now that the map is basically over, I'm going to take this last turn to quickly describe the story of this map. The main purpose of this chapter is to show the large gap in purpose between 2 of the enemy factions. The first boss was a regular Canaanite general, and he attempted to flee from the battlefield as soon as he realized that the battle was lost. In contrast, Dagon, representing the cult of Gerxel, ordered him and his soldiers to fight to the death, because the cult sees the regular soldiers, who are not pureblood Zoans, as mere cannon fodder. This conflict is pretty pervasive throughout the game, and it leads to some unfortunate events nearer the end. Anyway, Runan finally reaches the gate and seizes to complete the chapter in 11 turns. Narcus cost us quite a few turns in this chapter, but that's just the price we pay for doing full recruitment, and also he does save quite a few of those turns back with his contributions later. Out on the world map, it turns out that the original boss of this map survived long enough to give his steel shield to Runan, which we will accept with gratitude. And that will be all for this video. I will see you next time.